So we get some answers, but maybe not in the cleanest way. Let's talk about the new episode of Surface Daybreak. Hey everyone, it's David Stark from Watcher Pass. Today I'm here to talk to you about Surface Season 2, Episode 5, Daybreak. It comes to Apple TV Plus on March 21st, 2025. It is the 5th episode in Season 2 where Sophie, now Tess, somewhere in between, comes back to Britain to figure out what happened to her mother. This episode continues right where the last one left off after Tess and Eliza spent the night at the Huntley's summer home, mountain home, whatever home, nice home in the countryside, where Tess had a revelation that might change everyone's relationship. So, is this episode worth watching? Is this episode the one that's going to turn the corner on Surface? I liked this episode. I still think it's a watch later. I still think that this series has some problems, but overall, I thought it was an episode that gave us a few more answers, plenty of dramatic moments, but also feels a little bit messy at times with some drawn out scenes. I don't know why the scenes felt drawn out. This wasn't, an episode that was hurting for time. It was 44 minutes long, which is kind of in the range of normal Surface episodes, maybe a little bit longer. So there were some scenes that was just like, okay, we can move on. We don't have to get all of that pan. So look, overall, I still enjoy the series. I just don't think it's really that great. It's kind of like a guilty pleasure at this point. So I like the characters. I'm comfortable with it, but it's not really something that I'm going to write home about. So all that being said, I'm going to tell you a little about the episode, a few things I like, a few things I didn't like, and then really quickly go into a recap. So as you can imagine, there'll be spoilers in the recap section. If you don't know what happens in this episode, and you might not, there are some big revelations, some big answers to questions that we've had. I would turn off when I get to the recap. Before that, though, I'll keep it vague. I'll keep it spoiler free. Let you know I get to those spoilers. So in Surface Season 2, Episode 5, we have Tess continuing her investigation, trying to figure out how she fits into this whole world. There was a big revelation at the end of Episode 4, where it seems like Tess might actually secretly be a Huntley. That question gets explored here, and a lot of other new facts come into play as well. So, things I liked about this episode. The first, I still like the cast, and I'm liking some of the characters I didn't like before. The cast is still really fun. I enjoy all their characters. I think they all do a pretty good job. So I'm going to keep enjoying the cast until it tells me otherwise. But overall, look, I like the cast. I think it's a fun cast. I think it's an interesting group of characters, which kind of keeps the story moving along. Second thing I liked. Hey, look, I like James in this episode. I like his character more this time around. He feels a bit more genuine, feels a bit more vulnerable, feels a bit more emotional. We'll go into that in the recap, but I did like James's character. He kind of turned it around a little bit for me. The third thing I liked some answers. We get some answers. I like that we do get some answers. Some of the questions that we've had do get answered here. Of course, they can't just answer stuff. They drop more questions on top of that, but it does feel like we are getting some answers to the mysteries that we've had. And the last thing I liked, there are some fun writing moments. There's some fun clips where the characters say some like a little very light wordplay that happens that I enjoyed. So I will highlight those in the recap. So, all that being said, things I didn't love as much. The first, it's a little bit messy. Like, there are some pretty dramatic character shifts that happen, and also some of the characters seem to accept things a little bit too quickly. Not going to get into it here. I'll get into it later, but again, not the cleanest, tightest story. Second thing I didn't love as much, just some okay writing. Some of the characters just kind of feel a little bit off, some of the things that they say. Look, I already said I liked some of the writing. There were some fun quips here and there. But overall, the dialogue, the character motivations don't really crystallize that well for me. It feels like it comes down to the writing. Third thing I didn't love as much, I already mentioned it, some drawn out scenes. There are a few scenes that feel like the camera was like lingering unnecessarily. There's one scene where a character gets a drink. We see them get it, pour it, drink the whole thing, and then something important happened. I don't think we needed to see that whole scene. You could have just seen them pouring a drink and then there. Or, at the start, the camera pans like all the way throughout the house unnecessarily. Very minor things, but especially when an episode is already on the longer side of the Surface, and I'm hoping for more answers, more explanation. These drawn out scenes didn't really help that along the way. And the last thing I didn't love as much, Tess and Sophie. I did not like her character in this one. Her character had some pretty ridiculous, in my mind, reactions. I mean, maybe people will think differently, but I think some of her reactions were pretty ridiculous. I'll go into in the recap, but Tess/Sophie did not speak to me much in this episode. So, all that being said, Surface Season 2, Episode 5 is coming to Apple TV Plus on March 21st, 2025. Like I said, I think you should watch it later. It's a fun series. It's an okay series. I don't think you should go out and get Apple TV Plus just for this series. But if you're a Surface fan, if you like thrillers, then check it out if you already have Apple TV Plus, or if you're just a big fan. Otherwise, There's plenty of good content on Apple TV Plus. This isn't something to run out and get it for. But if you do check it out, let me know what you think. Let me know what you liked and didn't like. I'd love to hear it. I'm going to really quickly go into a recap right now. So if you don't know what happens this episode, I would turn it off now because there will be spoilers. So there are kind of three main story arcs in this episode in my mind. There's the Huntleys, there's Callum, and then there's the Ellises. So I'll start with the Huntleys first. Henry is keeping tabs on Tess. He wants to know what's going on with her, where she came from, things like that. And I liked this one because I think he's talking to Lucas, who's the person that's kind of like watching Tess, and he gives him like a rundown of what happened, and then he asks like, "Do you want me to put a security detail on your daughter?" As we found out, last episode and then at the start of this episode, Tess is actually Henry Huntley's daughter. So when Lucas says that, Henry just kind of looks at him confused, and then Lucas is like, Eliza, which I liked. It was a fun little clip, and we didn't know for certain that the Tess was Henry's daughter right at the start. So it was a fun little like foreshadowing moment with the way that they were saying things, where Henry was confused for a moment, and then Lucas had to like emphasize which daughter, even though Lucas doesn't know that either. So I liked that little bit of writing there. Meanwhile, Quinn wakes up from his bender, goes downstairs, sees two coffee cups in the sink, which we know are probably the coffee cups that James and Grace had in the morning after their little tryst. And then he gets a call from Richard, the like lawyer, about the news article that broke. We saw that at the end of episode 4. Meanwhile, Anne is closing up the house and goes into the dark room. And this dark room, it looks kind of like hidden into the wall. I mean, it's a door, but it almost looks like it's part of the wall. So I don't know how Tess found that earlier when she was snooping around with limited time, like how she found that dark room. I guess maybe she might have remembered it from the house, but I don't get the sense that she spent a ton of time in the house before, or at least a ton of time when she was able to free roam. But Anne goes into that dark room, finds the old pictures of Tess's mom, Emma, and you're like, why are these 10-year-old pictures still here? Does like Henry not use this room at all? Like, did he just have a dark room and then just like leave it be? I guess he doesn't live at the house, but like you would expect some new pictures to be up. Or does he just sit there developing old pictures of Emma and leave them there? Like, that's a bit weird, but it's fine. Anne sees these pictures and seems to recognize who this person is. She calls Henry and tells him that Eliza was over with one of her friends. And then he asks, is that her? And Henry's like, how did you know it was her? And Anne's like, well, she looks just like her mother. But then Anne suggests that Henry has to tell the kids about their, I guess, half sister, I guess, to get in front of the story. So Henry brings in his lawyer, Richard, who says basically that they should pay off Tess and that she should sign NDA. And I'm like, she's going to these soirees. She seems to be well off. I don't really know how much money it would take to get her to sign an NDA, but this seems to be the lawyer's approach. He wants to like do it clean and quietly. We will see if that works. Now, meanwhile, Quinn meets with Henry, and when he gets there, he like accuses his dad of killing Phoebe, and Henry doesn't admit it, but he also doesn't deny it either. So it's kind of in this gray area. We don't really know if Henry did it. It feels like they're trying to put the blame on him, but he doesn't actually admit or deny it. Then Henry tells Quinn about his half sister, and Quinn doesn't seem as phased as you would expect. You'd think he would be like, I don't know, livid or angry or something. He's just like kind of like half chuckles and then is like, are you going to tell Eliza? Because if you don't tell her, I will. And you're like, that's not the reaction I would have expected from you. I would expect you to be surprised. Like your dad had another daughter. You have a half sister. And this half sister has been creeping on your family for a while. Like that feels like maybe something that would hit you more emotionally. But no, Quinn just kind of like laughs it off and then says, I'm going to tell Eliza. So after this moment, Quinn gets into the car and him and Grace talk, and he tells Grace about Phoebe and that maybe his dad had her killed and that this is the family that you're getting into, and maybe this is your last chance to get out. And I was like, I mean, that's a nice story, but who is the driver? Like, who the drive? Is this a soundproof car? I don't think it is. Like that driver must be very well paid to be able to keep all these secrets that Quinn is just spilling in the car. And again, Grace kind of doesn't acknowledge that this is a surprise. So I think they can also be saying that maybe Grace as someone who knew what happened to Phoebe. But Grace seems to say that she loves Quinn and it seems like she's going to be in it for the long haul. Now later, Eliza goes to see Henry and she finds pictures of Emma there and she's looking through them and then she turns to Henry when he gets there and she's like, who is this person? So it seems like now Eliza is going to learn. We don't see her reaction. That will probably be the start of the next episode. Meanwhile, Over at Callum World. Callum is, working from home essentially. He's kind of like on a sabbatical from the paper. Claire comes over to help Callum with the story, and they look over the information he's gathered about Phoebe and also Tess. And while Claire is looking at this information, we find some sort of church that is related to where Tess first showed up. So they go to that church to research, and Claire goes with this pretext of like, we're writing a story about pillars in the community and want to talk about this church, and especially their like safe abandonment program for children. And right at the start, Callum's like, "Oh, I've got to go to the bathroom." And then he goes and like rummages through the church's files, finds a file that he pulls, and then it's kind of like bounces. And you're like, "That's weird." Like, I don't know. You would think that this interview would be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, some amount of time to talk about the church's mission and things like that. And Callum is just gone the entire time. And the pastor at one point asks, like, "Hey, like, is he okay? You think he found the bathroom?" And Claire's like, "Oh, he's a big boy." But then Callum just bounces. You would think that the pastor would be like, "Hey, I'm gonna go check to see if he's okay. Like, what if he passed out? What if he got lost?" All of those are things that could possibly happen. But no, 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 nothing weird happens here. Claire just eventually leaves and goes to the car, and Callum is in the car. Like, Callum, come back. Sit through this meeting. You don't have to just like bounce. Anyways, we see what Callum took. It was a file for a Tess Caldwell, who is not the Tess Caldwell that we have known and love hated at this point. It is a little white girl with red hair who died very young. And you're like, that is not the Tess that we know. So, begs the question, where did Tess come from? Now, afterwards, Claire and Quinn meet up, and it seems like Claire is the inside source that Quinn had that was giving him information from the newspaper, specifically giving him information from Callum's story. Now, Quinn asks for Claire's new source, and she's reluctant because the last one that she gave up died. And so Quinn eventually forces it out of her, not like violently, but basically says, like, look, you're part of this, and if you tell me, you'll never have to hear from me again. Claire tells him, Claire doesn't tell him, but he asks if it's Tess, and then Claire says she's not who you think she is, and then she walks away. What will Quinn do with that information? We don't know. Now, Callum then goes to Tess's and gives her the info from St. David's, and he says that this girl, was taken into the church when she was young. I think she was like 6, and then she died a few months after she arrived. And then Callum says, like, when did you take her name, and who are you? Uh, and then he leaves because Tess doesn't give him anything. Tess retreats into her own mind. And then Tess is looking over the paperwork, and we see a leaflet with a Father Martin on it. And that brings up an old memory of a Father Martin where Tess is like sitting there by the fireplace, and she looks over and sees Father Martin. Now, this looks very much like the scene we saw earlier where Tess is sitting at the fireplace, looks over and sees Anne, the sister of Henry. So is this the same place? Was Anne involved? And that's how, maybe Anne was sent to watch the girl. Like, we don't know. That we just get a glimpse, and that's the end of this episode. That's how this episode ends. Not a great episode. Not a great ending for this episode. Like, it just kind of introduces a whole brand new character that we haven't heard anything about, and doesn't give us any context. But that is the end of this episode. Now I'm going to finish up with the Ellis story because I thought that was more interesting in general. Meanwhile, in the Ellises, James calls Tess and asks her to meet. And when he gets there, he talks, I'll call her Sophie because that's how James knows her. So he tells Sophie that he has some money issues. And she's like, but the firm had insurance. Like, I saw the paperwork. And you're like, okay, great. You, the wife of a partner, stole $8 million dollars from the firm, and you think they're just gonna be like, oh, well, that money disappeared. This person who is the wife of our partner just took it. I guess we'll just file the insurance claim. No, of course, that's not how it's gonna work. They're gonna do an investigation. Even if you take it and run, they're gonna do an investigation and probably hold James liable too, because you are married, and so your crimes are probably gonna be imputed onto him because he's going to have financial liability for this crime. And so she's like so flippant about this when James is like, I have money issues. I had to pay all the money back. She's like, why would you have to pay the money back? That firm had insurance. Like, that's not how it would probably work. In any event, Tess seems really annoyed that James is like confronting her about money issues. And again, there seems to be a lot of backstory about Sophie and James that we got glimpses of in the first season. They implied some abuse, but never really delved into it. Maybe they're saving it for later. They implied that James was controlling, but it could be that he was just trying to control what Tess did because he was worried that she would relapse and try to kill herself again. I don't really get a good sense of their, relationship. It seemed like they were kind of happy at times. It seemed like they were enjoying it. And then James got a little, annoyed that that Tess kept trying to like push him. And then Tess got annoyed that James didn't want to keep doing that. And that kind of like led to the downfall of their relationship. And then there was, other stuff that happened in season one. But in any event, I was really bothered by like Tess's reaction to this. Like, well, I took $8 million and the firm had insurance, so you should have been fine. Like, no, of course not. Of course he's not going to be fine. And then James goes in and is like, look, I had to take out some pretty shady loans to keep you out of jail before you ended up killing yourself. Like, I didn't want you to go to jail, so I took out some shady loans. It's like, well, just get the bank to sort it out. And he's like, I didn't loan money from the bank. So he implies that there are some people that are going to hurt him unless he pays back the rest of the loan, or at least pays back some amount, which is apparently $100,000, which I thought that seems fairly low for someone who took $8 million and you had to take out shady loans to get them. And you already sold like your house and your cars and clothes and jewelry and things like that. Like $100,000 is not nothing. That's like 2 dozen eggs nowadays, but it is not an obscene amount. But in any event, this is what James says he needs to prevent himself from basically being killed. And then Tess, for some reason, tells James why she's here. She takes James to her mom's grave and is like, my mom is buried here, and Henry Huntley is my father. And James is like, oh, you brought me here last time, but you didn't tell me what happened to her. And you were like investigating something. This seems to be the last time that Tess was in England, which apparently was, I think, 8 months before this, which I don't necessarily know how the timeline and surface works. It feels like 8 months is not enough time. I think the implication is that 8 months is before her jumping off of the boat in Surface season one. But that doesn't seem like enough time for her to go into a coma, lose her memory, regain her memory, do the things that happened in season one, and then bounce to London and do the things that happened in season two. 8 months seems like a very, very short amount of time. I think that's the implication. I'm not certain though. But in any event, Tess says, James is like, last time you brought me here, but you didn't really tell me much. And he's like, you one time asked me to pick you up from somewhere. And she's like, can you take me to that place? And he's like, sure. And I was like, how could he find a place that he was at like 8 months ago? Maybe it's in his like iPhone history, but I don't know. I can't remember places I went to 2 weeks ago. How would he be able to navigate in London where he picked her up from 8 months ago after all the traumatic stuff that's happened to him in these 8 months? Anyways, James and Sophie go to that location. And there's an old family friend there, and she calls her Sophie, which is interesting because she has always been Tess in England. This person knew her as Sophie, and this person also knew her mom and her dad. And she said that her dad was at Oxford. I think that's where her mom and her dad met. But he was only there for a semester and flunked out. She said that they seemed to be in love, but Sophie's father, which we know is Henry's father, William, didn't want them to be together, so he stopped their relationship. And eventually Henry went and married someone else and had kids and had his own family. But this friend never really knew what happened to Sophie and Emma after that. She said that they thought that Henry had paid for them to move somewhere else, and then when Emma turned up dead, that was a big surprise. And then she kind of knew that Sophie was looking for answers and thought that maybe she had them at this point, but unfortunately Sophie does not. This person also doesn't know Tess Caldwell, so she wasn't going by Tess when she was younger. It seems like she went by Sophie and then went by Tess when she infiltrated the Huntleys, or like maybe got a new identity when she went to live with the Huntleys. And then she left and was Sophie, and then she now is back as Tess. So that seems to be the Sophie Tess chameleon changing scenario. Anyways, afterwards, James and Sophie go to Sophie's place. She takes out a little USB stick and puts the key code into this encrypted USB stick and doesn't even like cover it up. You can see the code as she's putting it in. Then she gives James $500,000, and then it seems like she wants him to stay at her place. I don't know if it's to talk, I don't know if it's to do something else, but it seems like she wants James to leave, and he is like, no, I've got to go. It seems like our relationship is just transactional now. And she's like, oh, so it's a take the money and run kind of night. And I like this line. He says, yeah, I call it the Sophie special. And then he walks away. Funny little quip. Again, really fun little lines here and there. She asks about his flight, like when he's leaving, because he mentioned earlier that he has a flight in 2 days, I think to inject some urgency into this whole scenario. And he says he didn't book one. Boom. And then he leaves. Now, after he leaves, He pulls out his phone and writes down a six-digit passcode. And that is a six-digit passcode to the USB stick. And you're like, man, she needs better OPSEC. She needed to cover it up or do something, make it so that it's not completely visible. But I guess she trusted James at this point because he was so down on his luck. But that is the end of Surface Season 2, Episode 5. Like I said, I'm enjoying this series. There's definitely some faults with it, but overall, it is enjoyable enough. I think you should watch later. If you like Surface, you like Surface Season 2. If you have Apple TV Plus, might as well throw it on, but it's not something to like run out and get Apple TV Plus for. Now, we do still have some questions though, as we always do. Like, what does James really want? Does he want the money? Does he want to get the money back from Sophie? Does he just want to hurt her? Maybe he wants to hurt her the same way that she hurt him, like take all of her money, leave her destitute, and then bounce. That would be my guess. That's kind of what my guess is in this whole scenario, but I'm not sure. Also, who killed Phoebe? They were very much projecting Henry in this episode. I still think maybe it could be Grace. It could be that Grace found out about Quinn and her and Phoebe's dalliance, which I loved in the British papers. They were calling it a dalliance. And then maybe she got jealous. Maybe she was worried that her, life wasn't going to work out right. And so Phoebe had to go away. That would be my guess, but I'm not sure. Also, who was Father Martin? Was he at this house? Was he at the like Huntley's house? Because that seems to be the implication of Tess in front of the fireplace. Does Anne know him? We don't know. We just met Father Martin, so we don't know anything about that. And also, when did Sophie become Tess, become Sophie? Like, what is that story? And I think it probably is. It seems like Sophie was Sophie as a young kid. Maybe they moved in with the Huntleys, and then Emma died, and Sophie was sent to this like, you know, essentially church abandonment area, and then they kind of like crafted a new identity for her so she could come work on the house in the stables and just kind of like be a stable hand at this house, and her father could watch over her there or at least keep an eye on her. And then as she grew up, maybe she, got close to Eliza, and maybe that night when she saw a ghost, maybe that was when someone, maybe it was this Father Martin, maybe Father Martin told her who she is, because maybe he was part of St. David's and he knew the whole story, and maybe he got drunk or worried or something and told her the backstory, and that's why Tess at that point ran and went to California and became Sophie again. I think that's kind of what happened, but we don't know. We'll find out later. But that is Surface Season 2, Episode 5. If you do check it out, let me know what you think. Let me know what you liked and didn't like. I'd love to hear it. And if you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.